Welcome to another episode of Haynes Directive Pod. My name is Haynes, your host. We're here to educate, energize, and elevate all listeners, myself included. And today we are having a special topic on public speaking. Public speaking is so important. We know that when you're a public speaker, you are responsible for making sure that you're articulating your vision, your mission. It's so important when it comes to running a business. You are speaking in front of folks, you're pitching your business, you're pitching your mission. When you're going into a job interview, you are speaking. You are speaking in front of folks. You're speaking about your experience and how you can add value to that company or to that business, right? Or to that organization that you're interviewing for. Today we have a very special guest. We're talking with one of my former guests as well, but this time we're talking about public speaking. Reuben Lowen is a founder of My Business is Your Business, where he leverages his background as a Navy SEAL to bring technical precision to financial service industry, a specialist in debt elimination and wealth protection. Reuben focuses on empowering individuals to build generational legacy through holistic financial planning. He's a firm believer that wealth is on the build of the foundation and disciplined mind, body, and bank account. He's also served as numerous leadership roles in an organization that is geared towards helping people with their public speaking in Toastmasters. And one thing I do want to mention before I bring in the special guest, when we talk about public speaking, we want to understand that when you're speaking, you want to make sure that you're telling a story, that you're hooking the audience in. Audience engagement is so important. When I was a school administrator and school teacher, if I'm teaching, I need to make sure that my students are fully engaged at all times. That's one of the most important things when you're giving a speech. You want to make sure that your audience is engaged. You also want to make sure that your voice is good, that you're pacing it really well, and that you're authentic. The audience wants to know, are you connecting with them? Is this a real story that you're portraying? And also, you also want to make sure that you're making contact. Eye contact is one of the most important things when you're giving a speech because the audience wants to know that you're connecting with them. So let's bring on Reuben Lowen. We're talking about public speaking. How are you, Reuben?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, we started talking about my background and
Yes.
and talking about telling my little history with David Goggins. The
Yeah.
he's somebody who should go to Toastmasters. Yeah, he's when he first got started, you've heard people say he cursed like a sailor. He really did. Yeah, yeah. When I was I was telling you that one of my old sparring partners that came up with Roy Jones Jr. and myself, Tyrone Smith, we
Mhm.
he went in the Navy and I went to Buds, and then we both ended up on the Navy boxing team in 1990.
Mm.
And I hurt my neck, so I couldn't go to the nationals in Colorado Springs, but he did.
Mhm.
When he was there after sparring, he standing on the edge of the ring, held his glove out to have his glove taken off, and this big dumb heavyweight, rather than unlacing the glove and taking it off, he just gave it a snatch, well, slung him to the ground, and his head hit the floor and killed him.
Mm.
The Navy was going to get rid of the Navy boxing team because of that, and I ended up writing this article that got published in the Police Athletic League. Um, they have a monthly periodical they put out, and they published it in there, and they ended up keeping the Navy boxing team, right? The After that, and I people started, you know, I was writing a lot about leadership, and they started saying you should go to schools and talk about, you know, that subject at schools. I'm like, oh, and I had given, I was an instructor, I was a master training specialist. I
Yeah.
was I was okay with getting up and talking about, the things I was teaching, whether it was boxing, how to run the obstacle course, the cross country course, teaching marksmanship training, or briefing for a parachute mission, things like that. I had no problem with, but I was a little anxious about getting up, so I go to a Toastmasters meeting in the Bilingue Club in Chula Vista, California. They were getting ready for their selecting their participant for the international speech contest, and I heard this guy give this incredible speech on how Francis Scott Key came up with the words to the Star Spangled Banner, and I was hooked
Mhm.
after that.
Yeah.
And, one of the clubs in Far Texas, the Hub City Toastmasters, one of the members, and she was my mentor there, was Luisa Montalvo. And Luisa was the first runner-up for the Toastmasters International Speech Contest in 2019. And then she ended up winning it in 2024.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
so she had she got me to pay attention to my ums, ahs, you knows, pub pregnant pauses, those kind of things. She got me paying attention to what I'm saying and saying it with purpose, right? She's
Mhm.
excellent at that. And she can give a presentation. And when she gives her speeches, she knows what she's talking about verbatim.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things with public speaking is making sure that folks are aware of what they're talking about, doing the research. That way it sounds authentic because when you're giving a speech, you want to make sure that you're up to par with the topic, you sound convincing, and you're authentic. Ruben, talk about why public speaking is so important. And we know that when you're running a business, when you're interviewing, when you're getting ready to start a business, the pitching part, the speaking is so important. Talk about why public speaking is so important.
Well, for me, I knew I was going to get out of the Navy
Yeah.
back in 1996, but being 10 years in the SEAL teams, every time I wrote a resume was like came up something carrying a gun, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. And through Toastmasters, I mean, the first job I got was sales. Everybody needs salespeople. Okay.
Everybody.
And
Yeah.
I started practicing and rehearsing my pitches and my closes the same way that I practice my speeches for Toastmasters. I
Mm,
would write it out and read it back until it, keep editing it till it read smooth. And then I'd read it into a tape recorder and play it back to myself. Okay. And
mhm.
that's how I started doing it. And then it works, right? When you'll hear any of these sales trainers, they're going to talk about, getting your script,
Yeah.
knowing who you're talking to. And then the thing that, like, I'm not trying to win a contest.
Mm,
I want to make sure that the people I'm talking to understand what I'm putting out.
yeah.
With what I do with the financial services, if people don't understand, they're not comfortable. If they're not comfortable, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's up to the speaker to make them feel comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. When I was an instructor in the beginning, there was this old guy. He was a pro fighter before World War II. He had a nose bent over here. He was a seaplane pilot. He was from like Rhode Island or somewhere like that. And he had this heavy Eastern accent. And he just knew the stick. He just knew his presentation cold. And these students, these, air crew or uh, AOCS candidates, they sleep deprived, right? And they'd be like falling asleep. So I'd walk around and I'd watch them and I'd snap my fingers, right? And they'd wake up. And then I started giving my own presentations and I'd be watching them. And if I'd be in the middle of my presentation and I snap my fingers just to make sure that you're paying attention, right? But that helped me when I got to Toastmasters and
Yeah.
making eye contact. I'm
Yeah.
making sure people are paying attention and they're engaged. They understand what I'm talking about
Hmm.
when I'm giving my presentation. And that's a big part of it. We are actually going to be having, a speechcraft program on Saturdays
Yeah.
here at the Spring Cypress Senior Living Facility. They got a really nice room. They got a little restaurant right next to it, right? So we're going to have it like 10:30 to 12, and on Saturdays, and it's going to be like 6 to 8 weeks, and it's like a compressed uh, training on Toastmasters, and we're going to open that up to businesses in the area. Business owners or managers, they
Yeah.
want their people to be able to communicate. If you, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be the expert on something. As long as you can speak intelligently, you can sound like you know what you're talking about. People think you know what you're talking about,
Absolutely.
and that gives credibility.
Credibility. Yeah.
It gives it you're transferring your ability to communicate actually adds value to whatever service or product that you're selling.
Absolutely.
That's a
Yeah.
big problem with AI. The people that are talking about AI
Hmm.
aren't articulating the value of it.
Mm.
I use Marbleism, and it's a suite. Yeah, I got a receptionist that I hardly ever use, because people that call me don't want to listen to the AI, right? But it has a executive assistant that is awesome, and I just tell her what I want, and like for graphics for my marketing, and
Yeah.
it's awesome. And like I just gave her a talk. I'm going to be giving a talk Monday night on NLP, personality profiles, love
Yeah.
languages,
Mm.
and writing them all together, right? I'm teaching that to my AI.
Hmm.
Tricks that you learn on how to determine if somebody's, if they're auditory, kinesthetic, visual communicator, the things you can determine on the personality profile, whether they're, Florence Littauer, her book, I read another one that had a similar theme. One was personality plus, one was personality profiles, but they use the same description. There's the uh, the strong choleric, which is the leader, the strong leader. Then they use the characteristics of like Winnie the Pooh. So the strong cleric's like the rabbit. They're kind of bossy, right? But they really can't hurt anybody. They
Hmm.
just talk, right? And they tell people what to do. They're the only one that can keep up with Tigger. They're the only one fast enough to keep up with Tigger, right? Then there's the popular sanguine, that's Tigger, right? It's got to be fun and exciting, or I'm out of here. And they don't take them well. Then there's the melancholy, which is Eeyore. They know everything, they know all the details, but they're kind of negative. They have a tendency of like, nobody's going to do it. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard, right? And then there's Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is a phlegmatic. Their emotions are never really fluctuate much, not a high or low. They're kind of even. They're steady, but they don't move fast. They'll frustrate the heck out of a cleric who wants to get things done like right now, right?
Yeah.
But they're non-threatening, and they do, if they have a goal, you can't keep Winnie the Pooh from its honey. Not bees, not a tall tree, not a fire, not a tornado or a hurricane, right? If they want it, if they have something set in their mind, they're going to get it. They're at and they're good support people. They don't realize that they're surrounded by everybody else. The strong, yes, who do you know that's a strong leader? I'm like, I don't know, and they're surrounded by them, right? But
Yeah.
those people change when they're around them, because they're not a threat. The strong cleric doesn't have to have his guard up because he's comfortable around that person. The popular sanguine isn't upstaged by them, and then the melancholy, they kind of get the melancholy to calm down, right? So that's Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is actually the leader of that little clique, right? It's kind of funny how that works. So that's what I'm going to be talking about on Monday night as my speech. I just practiced on you, so I appreciate that.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like what you were mentioning was so profound because when people think about speaking, we're thinking about making sure that we are prepared, prepped in what we're talking about. We don't have to be an expert in it, but we at least need to be prepared in what we're about to speak about. And like you also mentioned, having eye contact and making sure that audience is engaged. I mean, for me as a teacher, school administrator, if I'm teaching and I have students sleeping, they're not engaged, and that's not good because I need to have make sure my audience stays engaged. So with starting speeches, and for me, whenever I start a speech, I always come up with either a question or a story, or I'm hooking the audience in a way that's relevant to them. and keeping them engaged and keeping them active throughout the speech. And let me tell you, through your experience, talk to the listeners about overcoming fear and like stage fright, you know, making mistakes and et cetera, et cetera. Give them some advice on if they're just so nervous about speaking in front of folks. What would be your advice to overcoming that nervousness and that fear?
Well, my mother was my high school English and speech and drama teacher.
Mm,
And so in the eighth grade, I gave
hmm.
my first presentation and I modeled Gallagher. Do you know who that is? The Mad Hatter.
Mm.
He has a sludge-o-matic, right? So I sold the number one using that modeling that presentation style,
Yeah.
and it was everybody thought it was funny. We had to do the Romeo and Juliet skits, and I did the sword fighting. I played like I memorized all three characters, roles. So I'm saying one, and I turn around like I'm sword fighting with myself, right? And so I was never afraid of getting up. I was in like three school plays and I think four school plays.
Yeah.
I was never afraid of getting up and speaking to people. When I was like a 21, um, I went to instructor training course in the Navy, and I'm an E3. Everybody else is at least a lieutenant or a chief, right? And so I just modeled my instructors in SEAL. So we had this one instructor who was like about my height, but he was yoked. He's like a bodybuilder, and he'd get up and just like that. So I did the same thing he did, right? Just come up, stretch my chest and talk about what I knew about. And that's a big factor is when you talk about subjects that you're knowledgeable in, it helps. You know what you're talking about. You're not doubting yourself because you know what you're talking about, and that
Yeah.
carries over, right. Another thing is like we have some women at our club that are kind of quiet, real quiet. They speak really low, and they're mothers. And I tell them, okay, do you talk to your children like that? And they laugh. They start laughing because they don't. They yell at their kids, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
so pick somebody in the club that reminds you of your troubled child and speak to them the way you speak to your kids, right?
Yeah.
That the facility that we use, Jurgens Hall, which is our primary location, the acoustics are terrible. You have to speak up or people aren't going to hear you.
Yeah.
And then in the military, you know,
And there's no microphone. You just got to be able to just project your voice.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
move it, let's go. That was like
You hear
common.
them loud and clear.
That's how we talk to each other.
Hmm.
When you're online shooting all out, you have to speak up. All right, people aren't
Hmm.
going to get the commands. When you're in the back of the C-130 and you're like, stand up, hook up, in the door. And, you're given the commands. You got to speak up.
You have to.
So that's
Yeah.
I never had that problem.
Mm.
There's some people that'll give this just real monotone, but in sales, right? You have to you. Oh, have you ever been to a timeshare presentation?
Yes. Those are the best sales speeches ever. I
They
love
know
those.
all. They know that
They
how to
know how
do
to
that.
hook you in. They know how to get you there first. That's a pitch to get you into the room.
Yeah,
Then once they get you into the room, it's a whole pitching presentation for
yeah. They're
business.
they're they're masters of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I used to be with a company that recruited, and I'm at a timeshare presentation, and I'm like, you're not going to get me to buy, but I really like like your
Yeah.
presentation
I
skills.
love listening to the presentations because they really rehearsed it and they went through it. They got the music and the PowerPoints and everything. It's really put together well.
So when I first joined Toastmasters, they had a speech craft like the next meeting. So I signed up for it. And there was like 10 of us that all got through our first manual, the first 10 speeches that first year. which is, being a Toastmasters president or vice president of education. That's what you want. Has to get, to get their distinguished Toastmaster club ribbon, you got to have so many people reaching certain levels. You have so many members, so many new members, and so that's a part of it. And so when you run the speech crafters, you just get all of it. It's the fastest way to get a club to hit all the benchmarks, but it's also the best way to get the speakers, because everybody that joins Toastmasters has something they want to say. They got something they got to get off their chest, or that's just boiling up inside and they want to talk. They want to get it out. They want to talk. There's some people that are like, they know that they're challenged by public speaking. They're scared of it. They want to get over that fear. But there's other people that are like, they're doing it for their career or their job, those are the ones that come for a while and then they quit. Like, okay, I got it licked. Let me go, use my skill, and then you don't see them anymore. There's a lot of turnover in a Toastmasters club.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot of turnover for that. But when you get somebody that can articulate and present, they're in demand. They will excel. They'll climb up the ladder whatever organization they're involved with, whether it's their job or their business. They'll progress faster than somebody who's not. Even people that are very technically minded, that know all the details, if they can't transfer that information from their mind into somebody else's, they're not very effective.
And we need them to be effective, especially when it comes to business and even with nonprofits. I mean, a nonprofit has a mission that they're trying to execute. And when they're out speaking and gaining those strategic partnerships and they're talking to folks, they need to be able to understand their mission and understand to be able to articulate that. So that way they can get the mission, get the strategic partnerships and the money that they need to do their mission.
Okay, so the way people make their decisions, they may hear something that gets their interest, sparks their curiosity, but they won't move on it until that information has been confirmed by another reliable source. Some they have respect for because they've known them, or that other people promote. Then if they hear that same information from that other reliable source, that information connects, and they have those epiphanies, and they'll feel confident moving forward. So with what I do for a living, there's somebody that's so I talk a lot about the infinite banking or the family banking strategies.
Yes.
And just this morning, I stumbled on a Martin Matthews video talking about that exact subject. And it's really hard to find anybody that will talk about it in depth because they don't want the competition to know, right? They don't give the details very well because they want people to come to them, have an appointment, and then get the business done. Well, I saw on this Martin Matthews video. Now, Martin Matthews, I've known for 20 years. The guy, Danny Kravitz, that I work with, brought Martin Matthews into the industry. And Martin Matthews gets most of his business via social media, and he gets like high-level actors and sports professionals, sports celebrities. Those are his main client base, right? So he's on my team. He's in the same business I am, and I caught a video of him speaking about the things that I'm talking to people about, that they're like, oh, that sounds interesting, but I've never heard that before. Well, now I turn that other reliable source on, which is Martin Matthews, who's very good at public speaking. So when you become a good presenter, you become known for speaking about your subject.
Yeah.
You become the subject matter expert in something. Somebody else that's also in that field is going to use you a lot. You're going to become known in your industry.
Hmm.
Start speaking about it, knowledge with knowledge.
And
And
that's what, yep. And that's what it comes with being prepared. And that's the one thing I love about Toastmasters. For all the listeners, if you don't know about Toastmasters, please go to toastmasters.org. And the primary purpose of Toastmasters is to make sure that individuals are being more effective communicators and leaders. And what I like about Toastmasters too is because you have your prepared speeches, you have your improv speaking, and the constructive feedback evaluation from everyone. I think the prepared speeches give folks time to think about what they're going to talk about, craft the speech, practice that speech is already prepared, but talk about the improv because I think when people come to Toastmasters, they're saying, I need to improve my communication skills. I need to be able to get up and speak in front of folks. I need to be able to articulate myself. And I think the improv speaking, the table topics are so profound because it's giving them that practice on the spot. Here's something to talk about right here, right now, and let's practice it. Talk about the improv speaking portions of
well, you skipped over the evaluations.
what the
And I
evaluation is
had
very important too.
this one lady that was
Yeah,
started the same time I did. We both went through the speech crafter program. She was
yeah.
very sensitive when it came to doing evaluations. And because
Oh
of
yeah, that's another thing too. Yeah.
I had to learn to be more gracious giving my evaluations. And then
I'll say feedback, the feedback.
she ended up becoming the liaison for the NFL and the city of San Diego when the Super Bowl went to San Diego
Mm,
because of her presentation skills. That was phenomenal that she was able to do that. But
yeah.
when it comes to the impromptu speech, so there's pocket speeches. That's speeches that you've given, a topic that you've given before. Icebreakers are a good one to have a lot with, but you know the topic. So if you don't have if you go to a meeting, they don't have enough prepared speakers, you're like, I got a pocket speech. I got one that I've done many times, right? You just pull out an evaluation sheet and you give that speech.
Yeah.
And people get the benefit of hearing you speak knowledgeably, a well practiced, well rehearsed speech, a prepared speech. So you break them into vignettes. Okay, those are short little speeches within your primary speech, and you can develop those in table topics, which is the impromptu portion of the speech. They're going to give you a question, and this is what your mind starts going. You're like, you hear them ask the question, and you're like, okay, how would I answer that? And then they call on somebody else, right? But you've already like prepared that quickly in your mind, even though you didn't get called on, right? But eventually you get called on and you learn to quickly process that question and devise an answer and make a speech with a beginning, body, and conclusion. And it just becomes second nature.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because I think a lot of folks struggle when it comes to responding to random questions when it comes to speaking. And which is why this organization is so important because the keys to becoming a better public speaker is what you were talking about is being able to have that eye contact, telling a story, being authentic, audience engagement, as well as making sure that your voice is accelerated so that way people can hear you. Talk about how people can say, okay, I need to be a better public speaker. In addition to joining Toastmasters, and in addition to letting people listen to me speak, how can your advice for some of the for the listeners here to improve even more and get them to that stage that they're trying to get to?
Well, it's like what I do for my
Yeah,
business, right?
yeah,
If somebody doesn't have a reason to want to do better than their finances, with their finances, they don't
right.
have a greater goal or a greater material goal.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me to get them to do what they need to do to attain that financial success.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with your speaking. If you don't have a reason, a cause that you're promoting. Luisa Montalvo, she her cause is rescuing trafficked, not trafficked, is shelter dogs. She they euthanize more dogs, more pets in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas than the whole United States combined.
Mm.
She started going and she bought a little mini bus, like they used to use for the special ed kids in school, right? A little short bus, and to transport these shelter dogs to welcome homes in northern states, Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, places like that, New York, right? And that's her cause. And that's probably what got her started in public speaking, other than she has a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, business wise and dealing with people. But she's got a cause. She wants to be able to set up spay and neuter clinics in the Rio Grande Valley, so they don't have so many dogs and cats getting put down, right? And that's her, breaks her heart that she can't take them all with her, right, when she goes into the shelters. And because the ones she's not taking, they're going to get gassed and they're just going to burn them. And so that's her main cause. So if you got a cause, it'll cause you to do it'll cause you to step up in anything, your finances, uh
You're
and it
speaking.
it'll
Yeah.
cause you, yeah, if you got to get right now. Roy, I got about a month ago, I had somebody, I was working on boxing promotions, and we weren't getting anywhere, right? We were trying to do some boxing promotions on the reservations, and it was very difficult because that's not really where they make their money. They make money with the gaming, right? People sitting there watching a fight, they're not pulling the slots or playing blackjack, right? They're so that's not. I mean, afterwards, probably, but before and after, but they don't see it as a big moneymaker for them, right? And and it was very difficult. I'm like, I got to get back in my business, so I started getting back to work. And then this old chief that we were working with called me up out of the blue, says, just tell him who you are. And I'm like, well, I'm an ex-Navy SEAL. I used to box with Roy Jones. And the guy on the phone's like, oh, I got to get my business partner on the phone. Well, it was Roy Jones Jr. And they were part of this cause. So Roy Jones has got a campaign of using the proceeds from professional boxing events to pay for the rescue of trafficked children.
Mm.
The, and and then I let them know that like 25% of all trafficked people are being trafficked on the reservations, and nobody's getting arrested, nobody's going to rescue them now. But if you have money, you can get an ex-Navy SEAL to go. I know a bunch of them that'll go find them and track them down and rescue them, right? And get them back from the traffickers. But that's an important. That's what he's focused everything into right now, and that's so he's doing a show June 12th, and I'll send you the information on it. But the proceeds are going to go to get somebody to go track down, these trafficked women and children. And this year, to date, the year's almost halfway over, reported
Yeah.
over 50 abducted children off the reservation in the United States so far this year.
Mm.
That's the ones that have been reported.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very
And that's
powerful.
just on the reservations. That's not counting everywhere else. Right.
Right.
And so I'm like, my background being is, looking at the intel, like who's behind this and where are they at? Right. And so what I found out, bars and restaurants and motels and hotels is where the trafficking is going on.
Mm. And that's what people need to be able to, and that's what that speaker is doing, speaking about that. Um,
Right.
And I think that's so profound for all the listeners. I hope you're more educated, energized, and elevated as a result of this episode. Because if you're thinking about getting into public speaking, think about your passion. What are you really passionate about? What is something that brings you joy to speak about? And then start there, because when you are passionate about something, you really enjoy the topic, it's going to come out when you're on stage. As we close out, let's talk about AI in public speaking. So AI has just been a game changer. As we all know, when I was in college, I had to write my own speeches from scratch. There was no AI, there was none of that stuff. So I had to sit down and what's my hook? What's my body? Like, what am I talking about in the body part of the speech? What's my closing? Instead of just like writing a paper. So now folks are using AI. So give some advice to the listeners about AI and public speaking and improving their communication skills with the use of technology.
Well, I use primarily Marbleism. It's a suite of AI employees. I got an executive assistant. I got a
Yeah,
blog writer. I got a social media marketer. I got a plain marketing guy. But the executive assistant, I use the Eva. I use her the most, and I will upload the videos
yeah,
whenever I do my morning faith walk and talk, or when I give a speech at Toastmasters, I have it recorded, and then I get her take on my content, right? And then recently, I've been teaching her about the personality profiles, NLP, love languages, and how I apply them, or how I little tricks, little hacks that I use to help determine that. Those are like a little quiz. What's your favorite animal? Give me three adjectives describing that favorite animal. That's gonna that that's an indicator of how you see yourself. Your answers, your adjectives, your favorite color, the three adjectives describing that favorite color. That's gonna be an indicator of how other people see you. Your favorite body of water, three adjectives describing that favorite body of water. That relates to sex as it pertains to you. The And then you're in a room. Imagine you're in a room with four walls, a ceiling, and a floor. How does that make you feel? You know they're there. You just can't touch them. How does that make you feel? And that actually gives you an indicator of somebody's level of spirituality. It's really wild, right? And that's actually death as it pertains to you. That's what that is, right? And where if you're sleeping in a room, and the lights are off, right, and you're in a room, four walls and a ceiling and a floor. How does that make you feel, right? Well, you do it every night when you go to sleep, right? But when you ask that question to people, they'll be like the irritated or anxious, or that because they're thinking about they're in a room with four walls, ceiling, and floor. They can't see them or touch them, but they know that they're there. It all causes them anxiety, right? It's kind of funny. But the other question is like, tell me about your last vacation. So I'm auditory, so I had to listen. And if I hear you saying, we went to Niagara Falls and we saw the falls, bingo, right away. You said saw, tells me you're probably a visual communicator. Or you could hear the water, roaring. That tells me you're auditory, right? And then, if they start talking about they could feel the mist, hitting the temperature change and all that, that tells me they're kinesthetic. So
hmm
that's an indicator. That's how I determine what their communication is, and then I give that back to them. 70% of the population is visual. That's why videos work. That's
yeah,
why when you present, when you give a speech, your body language and your eye contact and your facial expressions,
yeah. You're
that's
connected with the audience.
that's
Yeah,
delivering 70% of your message is being projected based on what they see, not what you're saying. Okay, that's 70% of the population. You got 20% that are kinesthetic. They weigh all their senses equally. They internalize them, and how they feel determines how they make their decision. And then there's 7% of the population that's auditory, which is I'm one of those, right? I have to hear. I can if you said something that was incongruent 3 years from now, I would remember that. My mind would pick up on that, and like, but 3 years ago you said this. Just how I am. And then there's the 3%, and what they do is they're very adaptive. They will change, they will adapt their communication based on the situation that they're in or the
Yeah.
people that they're around. They'll adapt to visual, auditory, kinesthetic based
Yeah.
on the communication uh,
Communication.
programming of the person that they're communicating with.
Yeah. And I think that's so profound when it comes to AI and public speaking.
Well, I
Um,
teach that to my AI, right? So my
yeah.
AI is, this is like any program. When I first joined the Navy, I was
Hmm.
electronics technician on flight simulator. So they taught us to do basic programming.
Hmm.
Computers aren't smart. Computers
Do whatever you tell it.
only are as smart as the person who programmed them.
Hmm.
And all AI
Hmm.
is an interface for
Hmm.
you to program or ask it what you want. You whenever you're interacting with your AI and it gives you a product that you're not happy with, you don't like the graphics, you tell it what change to make,
Yeah.
and then it makes it. Then the more you start doing that, the more information you're asking it to interpret, it'll gear itself, it'll program itself to what you want.
Hmm.
Okay, so when you're giving your speeches, like when you send me this video, I'm gonna take it and you put it on YouTube, and I'm gonna upload it to Marbleism, and Eva's gonna hear this content.
Hmm.
I'm gonna get marketing content from this video.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, when you have StreamYard, it'll break it up into like little. It'll take every topic that you're talking about and break it up into shorts. It'll do it for you.
That's how advanced AI is. I mean, AI is just this is a game changer when it comes to
I use
running a
StreamYard.
business. And
I do.
yeah, StreamYard. Yeah. And I just think that, as we continue, you know, as we go into the future, AI is just to become more and more intense when it comes to that. Well, I'm gonna have to close out this episode. We talked about so much stuff. There'll be more episodes on public speaking, more episodes on how people can get involved. Um, and
My
my
website
final,
is my
yeah,
business is yourbusiness.info.
that's
Connect with me
right.
on.
Connect with Reuben on there and go to Toastmasters too. And I just think that, it starts in the house. I was giving speeches to myself in the mirror. And I was just sitting to myself, you know what, I'm going to practice and keep practicing and also watching speeches, watching other people to speak. If you have a speaker, listeners that you want to listen to, that will inspire you, take notes from them, and it's going to get you further and further ahead. This has been another episode of the Haynes Directive Pod. Hope that you enjoyed this episode. Be more episodes to come. Thank you, Ruben, for being with me today.
Yeah, glad to have you. Glad you had me. Thank you.
Take care.